Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Radio Entrepreneurs. My name again is JDavis, and we continue to stream stories of entrepreneurship, leadership, and how to deal with this economy in a very successful way, real life cases. And every week we like to check in with Mark Furman, director, shareholder of the law firm Tarlow, Breed, Hart Rodgers for Entrepreneurship and the Law. Welcome back, Mark.
Hi, Jeffrey. Great to be with you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Every week I'm dealing with clients who don't or want to interpret the law their way. And that can be a real problem. I always tell them, you better speak to your lawyer. And they're like,
Well, case that's going on right now is a suit by the New York State Attorney General against Donald Trump and others relating to the allegation that they, over a lengthy period of time, overvalued their net worth. And I think she alleges it's by in excess of $3 billion. Well, most companies, privately owned companies, obviously aren't worth $3.6 billion, so it would be hard to overvalue it by that amount. But it did, reading about the case caused me to think about how the issue of overvaluation does come up for private business owners. And you need some operating capital, you want to have a line of credit, maybe you want to get long-term debt. So you contact your banker and you apply for a line of credit or letter of credit or longer term loan. You, of course, submit a financial statement, which asks you to both list the assets that are going to secure the loan as well as the values. And banks make decisions based upon what those financial statements say, and they typically are signed under the pains and penalties of perjury. So what's the harm? Pretty unusual for an attorney general to sue a business, in my experience. But when the loan becomes a problem to a bank, and the bank determines that the assets were inflated, they can accuse the borrower of fraud. Well, so what's the big deal if they can prove fraud? Well, it's not, it can be a violation of criminal statutes, but civilly, it also can give rise to personal liability, even if you haven't guaranteed the loan. Personal not guaranteeing a loan means you're not liable for breach of contract, for breaching the contract to guarantee the loan. In other words, for the company, your agreement to pay if the company doesn't. But for financial fraud, it can even prevent a discharge in bankruptcy. So these things have very serious considerations, and people who are sophisticated will put all sorts of disclaimers when they write down their valuation. You obviously want to put your best foot forward, but you can't be untruthful. And if you don't know the value, or you don't know the range of value, you can write unknown. So if you've got a recent appraisal of a piece of property that says it's worth $500,000 as its market value, you don't want to be writing down $1.5 million or a different number, because you're going to have a contemporaneous document that's going to show that you had no reason to believe it was worth more than the $500,000. So don't be too, I don't know what the right word is, aggressive, boastful, inflating of the value, and that's a good way to mitigate litigation risks. And the more a company is struggling, the more it's the temptation can be there, but resist the temptation.
I'm going to try to pasteurize this as much as possible. You trigger me on one old story, which I'll try to keep clean to protect the innocent, of a privately owned company I used to know. It was working in an extraordinarily small margin industry. And I was always shocked that every 2 to 3 years they were doubling in size. I didn't know how they could do it in that industry. And then one day I heard that the feds had swarmed the company, taken all of its books, computers. And the next thing I know, the owners were arrested. They had been falsifying their numbers for years to get increased bank lines. So they were borrowing against fraudulent numbers, and they went to prison. And that's what it reminds me of. And, then we get to the whole subject in this society and other societies today, and that is, can certain leaders get so powerful in certain countries, not just one, that they can be above the law? And I think that seems to be a trend around the world right now, that certain leaders think that they can become above the law. So I don't want to get too much in trouble. But I was always shocked by that one company because I didn't know how they could grow. I couldn't figure it out, because when you're working at such small margins, you can't double every 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, well, needless to say, that's another way that you can, inflating your revenue will lead to typically a higher valuation, assuming it's profitable revenue. And not only do financial statements require information about assets, they also require information about income and expenses. So it's a false financial statement to inflate your revenue.
How much responsibility, and again, you're just saying subjectively, I understand every case is different, is there on the part of the bank for not doing better due diligence, or even an investor? I mean, if I'm sure somebody in the other situation would say, they had an obligation to check if they wanted. They believed it, we put it out, we kept putting it out year after year, and the investors too didn't do their due diligence. So is there sort of responsibility? Can that be spread all around?
Well, it's certainly an argument that can be made that there has to be reasonable reliance. If you're just talking about civil liability for fraud, the elements typically are a misrepresentation that you knew was not true, that the other side relied on, that their reliance was reasonable, and that they suffered damages. So you can argue that there was no reasonable reliance. If we're talking about a piece of real estate, if you don't get your own appraisal, or you don't take a mortgage on the property, but I wouldn't be relying on that as the get out of jail free card to avoid liability for, you're talking about deception, and that never looks good when the tide comes out, and the facts are known. So, but yes, that argument can be made and has been made. I've made it myself, representing client accused of submitting, call it a slightly exaggerated financial statements. But, typically a bank is going to require, X number of years tax returns. Those tax returns are under the pains and penalties of perjury. So if that's a condition of the loan,
It also reminds me of a sweet old accountant that we both know. And he was talking to me once about doing audits. And he said, whenever I go into an audit with the IRS, I don't want the client with me. And I said, why? He said, because I can't call them stupid with them in the room. Mark, if somebody's looking,
that accountant is a wise man.
Yeah, I didn't do the voice. Mark, if somebody's looking, I think this is a great topic. I think more entrepreneurs have to understand what they can and can't do, that there are such strict rules. But if someone's looking for you, how would they find you?
Best way to reach me is by email, Furman, Furman, at TBHR-law.com.
Well, thank you very much, Mark. And for all our listeners, Mark Furman is on Radio Entrepreneurs with Entrepreneurship and the Law every week. So stay tuned for more stories.